everyone. This video is a book review and also a memorial video in remembrance of the Columbine massacre. This year is the 23rd anniversary of the Columbine massacre, which occurred April 20th, 1999. This video is going to be containing some triggering topics, so if you are triggered by any one of these topics, you can click off of the video. I will be discussing homicide, suicide, bullying, prevention, and some other factors as well, because all of these relate to the Columbine massacre. At the end of this video, I'm going to be posting a poem that I wrote, and it was inspired by the book that we will be reviewing. It is basically the journey that leads to such an event as Columbine. The book that I will be reviewing for this video is written by Randy Brown, and Randy Brown is a parent of two former Columbine students. Randy Brown, Columbine High School parent. The title of this book is called The Inside Story of Columbine: Lies, Cover-Ups, Ballistics, Lessons, with a bonus chapter, How to Stop a School Shooting. Now, this book is very, very thick. It is literally over 600 pages. I am not finished with this book, so what I will be reviewing is basically what I have read so far. I'm only on maybe page 220 or so, maybe even less than that, but I've made it past page 200. And I will tell you, I learned a lot from this book, and I also received more information and answers to questions that I had about Columbine. So before I get into all of that, let me read to you a little bio about Randy Brown. So I had to really look online to see if I could find any type of bio about him, and the only thing I could find was on Amazon. And this is what he wrote. Hi, my name is Randy Brown. I wrote the book, The Inside Story of Columbine: Lies, Cover-Ups, Ballistics, Lessons. I am a Columbine parent. My family reported Eric and Dylan in 1998, and we have been involved in the Columbine tragedy since then. This book is the story of the investigation of the cover-up of the truth at Columbine. It tells the story from an insider point of view. It took 20 years to write, and you will learn details and lessons that are very important. The book deals with humiliation, hypervigilance, and violentization, and how they relate to school shooters. This book is the truth and the answers. The lessons you learn, or the lessons you are searching for, can be found here. Read it and learn. There is a bonus chapter about how to stop a school shooting that everyone should read and learn. The final chapter reveals the mystery of Columbine, finally solved. So that is what he wrote as his own bio. Now, the reason I'm choosing to do Columbine is it's actually part of a series of book reviews I'm doing. I am trying to go back to different historical events that happened during my life when I was a child and really look back at the information that I never knew about or was too young to understand. So last year I did a 4-part series or video series on September 11th. If it was 2001, I had just turned 12, I guess, in 2001, and I only had limited information. So reading those books about September 11th really gave me insight to how horrific that day was. But I had to be very careful because sometimes when you go back and you reflect on those memories, it can be very stressful. The September 11th book, one of the books was extremely stressful because it was first-person accounts, and it was one of the most difficult books I've ever read, besides 100 Years of Lynchings. This year, I'm also going to be doing something on JonBenet Ramsey because we were near the same age when she was murdered, and I want to learn more information about that case. All of these events had some type of impact on my life, whether it played on my fears, whether it made me see people in a new way, and the same is with Columbine. Columbine, I feel, was a very powerful, unfortunately, school shooting. It literally became the template for other school shooters. Now, there were school shootings before Columbine, but the way that it happened, the whole process of everything it involved made it stick in the memory of people that were alive back then. So when Columbine happened, I was going to be 10 years old that year. And the only thing I remember thinking was, ooh, I better be careful when I go to high school. That's what I thought. I was like, ooh, I better be careful when I go to high school. I had never seen anything like that. It took a while to find a good book for me to review for Columbine or the anniversary. There was a selection of books that I could have chosen from. There was Columbine, written by Dave Cullen, which I already read. I believe I read it in 2011, or I honestly don't know what year, but I remember reading that book, and a lot of people that were involved with Columbine stated that they didn't like that book very much, so I didn't choose to review that. I also had the choice of reading Randy Brown's son's book, but I didn't know about his book until, after I bought his father's book. There was also another one called A Mother's, I don't remember it, but it was written by Sue Klebold, who is the mother of Dylan Klebold, one of the shooters of Columbine. The reason I didn't select that book was because there were so many reviews of that book, and also you can find very many lectures spoken by Sue Klebold in regards to her son. So I felt like that would be better than me doing a personal book review. But this one, it was a challenge. It's 600 pages. It was somebody I didn't really know. It seemed like it would house a lot of information in it, and so far I have learned a lot. So let's get into this book. So Randy starts off with the introduction. He says, this book has taken over 20 years to finish. Now, how this book is laid out, as you can see, this is literally the layout. There's no like, oh, there's a break for chapters. Like, it's literally one after the other, after the other, after the other. Not very many pictures. It's all told from first-person account. The overall feeling I got from this book was gradually increasing depression, which is why I would have to take a break or two from reading it. It kind of reminds me of the layout of 100 Years of Lynching, because that book was laid out in almost the exact same manner. But you get what you pay for. So the background story of Randy and his family is that they were first friends with Dylan Klebold. And if you don't know who Dylan Klebold is, as I stated earlier, he was one of the two shooters, reportedly, of the Columbine massacre. He had been friends with Randy's children since he was a little boy. So if you read this book, you're going to notice that Randy talks about Dylan the most because he knew him the best. He had seen him grow up. He knew his parents. He knew how they raised Dylan. He had more of a connection with Dylan. So in certain chapters, it almost seems like he's sympathizing with Dylan, and in other chapters it seems like he's criticizing Dylan, but that's because, you know, he knew him personally, and he had more of a connection with him than he did with Eric Harris, who was the other shooter. Randy's family also had problems with Eric Harris because Eric was also friends with their sons, and Eric threatened the life of their son, Brooks Brown. So we're going to get all into that. He states at the beginning that he is biased, which I can also see in the book. He says, yes, I am certainly biased. Yes, I certainly see things a certain way. I wrote things that were too comprehensive in their criticism. It is certainly unfair to say that all the SWAT team members were cowards. There may be SWAT members who are not cowards, although I did not see one of them act in a courageous way on April 20th, 1999. So also in this book, Randy will pick out different people to criticize because they either did something wrong or they gave him a personal problem. So some of the names that you will see when you read this book are Sheriff Stone, and Sheriff Stone was the sheriff who basically accused his son of being behind the Columbine, all because his son was associated with Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. So he really does not like Sheriff Stone. He'll also criticize the way the SWAT team went into the school, criticizing the whole school, how it was operated, and other people. So he is very much name dropping in this book. So if you're one that loves to name drop and be messy, I think this book will be good for you. So, April 1998. A moment in time, 1 year before Columbine, a background chapter. Judy, which is Randy Brown's wife, Judy went to King Soopers, our local grocery store. This was after we had received the death threats from Eric, after we had turned him into the police. When she was leaving the store, she saw Eric Harris and the express sign. This was in the old days, when there were actually checkers, and a line. As she walked past him, he slapped a magazine down on the counter. Judy stopped and backed up a step and read the title. She was careful not to let Eric see what she was doing. Shotgun magazine, rifle magazine. Judy doesn't remember the exact name, but it was a gun magazine. Judy was very upset. Of all the people in the world, Judy knew that Eric was dangerous. Judy could read him. She sensed danger. She felt it. We had already had serious problems with Eric. Judy had seen his anger and his behavior. So this was a new problem. After that, she decided to call the police. She called Detective Hicks again and left him a message, telling him that Eric was now interested in guns. She said, Detective Hicks, this is Judy Brown, regarding Eric Harris. I was at the grocery store and saw Eric buying a magazine about guns. You have to call me back. Jonesboro is going to happen here. He is into guns now. Judy Brown, and she left her number. So Jonesboro, which she was referring to, was a school shooting that happened March 24th, 1998, that left 5 children dead. This was 1 year before Columbine and only 6 days after we had reported Eric and Dylan to the police for the death threats and bomb-making activity. So a lot of people don't know that they already had reports on Dylan and Aaron, or not Aaron, Dylan and Eric. Some people, when they think of Columbine, oh, it's a random shooting and all of that. Or, oh, they were bullied and it led up to that. Why didn't people see the signs? People already saw the signs. Judy, Randy Brown's wife, was one of the first people to really emphasize that Eric was dangerous. Like, they already knew Dylan hung out with him, but they had already known Dylan. It's almost like me working with children. Like, I had children, not me having children, but I've worked with children that grew up to be like completely different than what I expected them to be. Like, complete total opposite of how they were raised, complete total opposite of like everything anybody had put into their mind, their parents, their teachers, all of that. But Judy was a mother. She saw what the behaviors could become. Before Columbine, yes, there were shootings. Yes, there were like different school shootings and all of that. But the reason I say this one sticks out in our minds, think about it, it's 1999. The internet is kind of relatively new. I mean, you have people using the internet, but not to the level that we're using the internet right now. Like we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram. Everything is social media oriented. This was still the time where you're transitioning into the internet. I was in kindergarten in 1996, and the only internet involvement I had was computer games, like computer games, teaching, reading, and all of that. But it wasn't incorporated into my schooling. Back then, there were still chalkboards. There were no smartboards. Smartboards didn't come until I was, in high school. Cell phones looked, still kind of boxy. You didn't have any touch screens. Technology was still, is it rudimentary? Even though it was gaining traction. Think about how Columbine, that area, was essentially laid out. You're in Littleton, Colorado. I'm not very familiar with like geography or anything. I don't know if it was small, if it was big, if it was like a part of Denver. I honestly don't know because I'm not from there. But you had Littleton, Colorado, basically, according to Randy Brown's descriptions, it seemed mostly like a suburb, a safe place that you will want to raise your children, very family oriented. Most people were of well means, perhaps. So this isn't the environment that you think something like Columbine would happen. It almost would be less surprising if it happened during like a city with gang violence. But I guess by that time, people were more desensitized by gang violence because gang violence had been happening since, the 80s. Like you had the hip hop, you had all of that. This was not something people were used to. This didn't have the look of what they thought random shootings would have. As I stated, gang violence. It's like, oh, those kids, they were impoverished, they're running the streets, they're in this hip hop thing. Of course they would go around and shoot people. You don't expect a child that's living in a somewhat comfortable environment, most often from a 2-parent household, to pull something like this. Also, another reason Columbine stands out is because it was actually supposed to be bigger than it initially was. They were planning on shooting people, but it was actually a failed bombing. It was actually a failed bomb attempt. If their bombs had worked, it should have taken out at least 500-600 people. They had been creating these bombs for a long period of time. They had already accessed the guns. They were shooting. They were practicing shooting. They already had these web pages. Well, actually, Eric had the web pages talking about killing and different things. If there was a political figure that they were targeting and somebody had seen those web pages, they would have been arrested. But since it was a kid with a web page of threats against Randy Brown's son, nothing was made of it. They're like, oh, well, I'm not going to take this seriously. If you did that stuff today, in this society, with a whole web page of stuff and threats, you will be going to juvie. You will be arrested. You might even be tried as an adult. I don't know. But you can't pull that mess today because they're always watching you. What they got away with back then, they could never possibly get away with today, or at least there would be some barriers in place of that. So, they had already reported Eric Harris to the police. Not once, not twice, but maybe about 7 times. So Columbine was actually preventable. They had proof that he was making bombs. They had proof that he was shooting weapons, that he had accessed weapons. They had proof that he was like dropping off pipe bombs. They already had a record on him and Dylan breaking into a van. Me personally, knowing now from what I've read with Randy and just growing up as myself and seeing one school shooting after another school shooting after another school shooting on the media, Columbine was 100% preventable. But what is the factor that triggered Columbine? Randy's perspective is bullying. He talks in this book about all of the different types of bullying that occurred at Columbine. He calls Columbine an abusive parent. He references a book called When a Child Kills. And in July 1999, he wrote this chapter. Columbine High School was a school of cliques. Because it was so big, 1,900 students. Students were lost in a crowd of nameless faces. The jocks stuck together and picked on smaller kids. Not all of the jocks did this, but enough did to create a separate class of students. One small group of 8 or 9 jocks was the worst. They were the bully core of the school football team. They were hardcore, they were tough and mean, they were strong, they were terrifying. Stories circulated, some of them true, about beating up girlfriends, about a stabbing, about trashing someone's apartment, about power and money and expensive cars and steroids and drugs and drinking. No one challenged this group, no one dared. Some of them would actually ride around in their cars looking for other students to get into fights with. That is a fact. They would harass the other students. The coaches encouraged this group. It made them a better team, and nothing mattered more than a team and winning. The principal, DeAngelis, was a former coach. His focus, like the principal before him, was success at sports. Jocks were given special treatment, better grades. It was standard and accepted. Other cliques were known and accepted. Preppies, druggies, smokers, and others. You joined in to have a group to belong to, or you didn't fit in, and you were an outsider. To teenage boys and girls, being an outsider was hell. Nothing mattered more at that age than friends, acceptance, and validation. If you ended up with friends who were smokers, you smoked. The rules your parents set up took second place. You know what, that last line, if you ended up with friends who were smokers, you smoked. I literally just had a flashback of this book that Jawanza Kunjufu wrote called To Be Popular or To Be Smart. I read this maybe 10 years ago, maybe even longer, further away than that. Jawanza Kunjufu, if you don't know, he's a Black author. He wrote, his most popular book is The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. And years later, he wrote a book on Black girls, which I really, really liked because he was always, focused on boys. But he wrote this book talking about the power of the peer group. And I feel like the power of the peer group is basically even more powerful than a parent, because with a peer group, you can relate to the peers. With a peer group, especially if you're in school, you're spending almost as much time with them as you are with your parents. They are literally on the same level as you. You want to be accepted by them. You know that your parents are going to accept you most often, but your peer group you really, really, really want to accept, because you're not a child for that long. Even when you become an adult, the peer group has, I guess, the same amount of power over you even more power now that you're out on your own. Your peer group is your boss, your peer group is your job, it's your coworkers, it's the people that you interact with, the different groups that you join as an adult. It's a very powerful force. When you think about the different peer groups in high schools, I haven't been out of high school that long. I graduated in 2008. I might have seen peer groups at the high school that I went to or graduated from, but the schools I went to before, you didn't see that much bullying. Like, you might have seen teasing, but as far as the level that Randy Brown talks about in this book, I didn't see it. The school I went to, my first school was a predominantly white Christian school. So I guess I would basically be like the minority in the school. There weren't that many people of color at the school. However, even though I experienced teasing, I didn't experience this level of bullying. The main reason was because everyone in the school was almost connected. If you went to the school, most likely you went to the church. Some of the parents were actually educators in the school, or they worked on the staff in the school. They might have worked in the office, they might have worked in the cafeteria. The classes were so small that if one person had a slumber party, let's say it's a girl, then the entire grade went to that slumber party. Because there was maybe like 15 kids in an entire grade. One year we had 2 seniors in the senior class. Siblings went to the same school. It went from preschool all the way through 12th grade. We didn't have like, oh, we're going to be sending you off here, we're going to be sending you off there. It was an environment that fostered, I guess, care. You knew that there were people there that loved you. We also had like prayer in our school. Some people nowadays are like, oh, I need the 10 Commandments in school. I mean, 10 Commandments is okay. But not everybody is of a certain belief system. But I do think like prayer or some type of form of meditation in school would really help some of these children. As I mentioned before, I worked with children for about 13 years, and I didn't work as a teacher. I just worked in different after-school programs and various things. But watching these children get progressively more and more and more, I can't think of a word. I'm just going to use the word outlandish because I don't know what other word to think of. That's what really made me stop working with children. The medications they were on were making them like really act out. They were becoming more violent. They were being exposed to more things that I had not been exposed to as a child. And it just became harder and harder and harder to work with them. Disrespectful to adults. They had more respect for their peers because their peers would influence them. Their peers are the ones that would show them the media. Their peers were the ones that would introduce them to different things that their parents say that they couldn't be introduced to. He says in this book that Columbine, according to him, now this isn't me, this is according to the author, Columbine was more football-oriented, sports-oriented, mainly because the people in the, let's say the principal and all of them had been involved in football. So it had some type of favoritism for athletics. You still see this nowadays, except it's not athletics, it's mathematics. If you're good in math, you are the star of the school. You'll get this, you'll get that. Oh, forget the art students, forget the theater students. No, it's all about math or it's all about sports. STEM. Right now they're, STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. You completely forgot the arts? Okay. Now they're starting to bring in the arts, but it's still, kind of making leeway. It's STEAM. But he emphasizes that they would have special favors for the athletes. They would have big trophy cases of things that the athletes won. He said they should have been more focused on academics, which I personally agree with. They should have been focused more on academics. Now, is that the only reason that Eric and Dylan did that? I don't believe so. There were other factors as well. Eric, I believe, was on a medication called Luvox. If that's how you pronounce it, Luvox. And as you know, like when a child is on medication, they have so many ways that they can react. They can react in violence, they can withdraw, they can become more suicidal. It's literally playing with the chemicals in their brain. So you honestly don't know what you're going to get unless you see a pattern of other children going through the same thing. So Eric was on Luvox, which according to Randy was known to like cause this hypervigilance, delusions, and all of that. I feel as he was further on these medications, his delusions became more and more grandiose. But anyway, sorry, I have to like pause because it's just so much. This book was so depressing, like I can't even describe. Over and over and over again in this book, Randy's talking about Dylan. Why? I can't believe it. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe these children were killed. I just can't believe it. And after a while, for some people it might seem redundant, but I understand because these are 20 years of journal entries. And sometimes you have to repeat a thought in order to work out how you can emotionally handle these thoughts. I know there was one time where I rode a bus with this dude. I didn't know him that well, but I just, I kind of knew him. We talked a little bit. He would always wear this hat. And maybe after talking to him about a year, he was arrested. He killed somebody outside of a gas station, and then the very next day, he killed somebody on the bus. I guess he's still in prison now, but just imagining how close, such close proximity that you are to somebody who could do something like that. We see people the way that we want to see them, just as Randy Brown saw Dylan as how he wanted to see him for the longest time. It was hard to wrap his mind around that this child that he had watched as a little boy had grown up and literally slaughtered 13 people. 13 people who didn't deserve it, 13 people who are just living their lives. You had Isaiah, who was a black dude. They shot him just because he was black. You had, I think, was it Rachel Joy? They targeted her just because she was a Christian. She believed in Jesus. Like, she was a target for them. Targeted jocks, targeted teachers. They didn't care. They just hated the school. The school was their ultimate target because apparently the school gave them pain. They were essentially the lowest of the lowest on the totem pole. I feel personally that Dylan was more suicidal and Eric was more homicidal, even though some people might argue with that because in the end, Dylan did kill a lot of people very viciously and brutally, but he also had suicidal thoughts. His mother stated that he was cutting himself. Eric, there's not a lot about his parents out except maybe in Dave Cullen's book, but his father was from the military. So I guess military families, some military families run their household with an iron fist. Perhaps his father's influence on him might have drove him to the edge as well. He was not as tall as Dylan. Eric was maybe I don't know, he was 5'8", 5'9", but he was not 6 feet tall. Dylan was tall, maybe he probably was either 6 foot or 6'1" or close to 6 feet, but very lanky. Both of these children could have, if they had waited long enough, started an entirely new life somewhere. They could have gone off to college because Dylan was about to go off to school to Arizona. Eric was going to join the military, but obviously he didn't pass his, I guess he failed his test. I don't know if it was the Marines or something else, but his whole thing was a series of failures. If they had just waited long enough, if they had just graduated and went on with their lives, they would have seen that high school was not a big deal. High school is a big deal, but at the same time, it's not a big deal. Some of the people that gave you a problem in high school, years later, you can't even remember their names. Randy also talks about another book. I can't remember if it's the same book, When a Child Kills, how a series of humiliation can cause a person to snap. Not just humiliation from like parents, but peer groups and those who are in authority. Because these two children lived in an environment that was just like overlooking them. Oh, boys will be boys. Oh, it's not a big deal. I went through bullying too. They'll just grow out of it. They didn't take these threats seriously, even though there was literally 7 times that they were reported to the police. I personally feel, and I'm just saying this as my opinion, it's not a fact, I feel that Eric's father might have had something to do with some of these files going missing, because apparently almost either 2 of the files remain or almost all of the files went missing. There wasn't somebody inside getting rid of these files, so somebody wouldn't have a record, especially Eric. There was files on Eric that completely disappeared. It was negligence in police work. This whole book has the theme of negligence. Negligence in the school, negligence in police work, negligence with the SWAT team as well. How are you going to be a SWAT team and it takes you 3 hours to get into a school for a shooting? Please tell me, how are you going to do that? How are you going to be a police officer and you see this person is building bombs, this person is shooting guns and threatening the life of another person, yet you don't do anything? You don't even put them in juvie. Make it make sense. But anyway. Okay. What was I saying? I was saying something about homicide, suicide. I'm sorry, I'm gathering my thoughts. The Dylan factor before prom. We know that on Friday, Eric came over to Dylan's house at about 10 p.m. He had a duffel bag with him. Tom and Sue saw him in the duffel bag. This was fairly normal behavior. All the kids carried backpacks filled with their junk and food and video games. In retrospect, this was a big event. Eric brought pipe bombs and weapons to Dylan's house 4 days before the murders, but at the time it was barely worth noting. What happened that night? What was the course of events that kept Dylan involved, that ended up with Dylan parked outside the school in his own car with weapons and bombs and the intent to kill? What I want to know is, how are you going to have pipe bombs in my house and I'm a parent and I don't know about it? How are you going to have weapons in my house and I don't know about it? Why can't I go in your room? I own this house. We're not about to have you closing doors on me all the time. Oh, no. Okay? You're not about to be out in the woods shooting guns and I know about it. No, that's not about to happen. Where did you get the guns? You're not legally old enough to get these guns. Who are you talking to? There has to be some type of intervention. Now, I don't know how Eric Harris's household was run, but as far as Dylan Klebold's household, his parents, they say, were pacifists. They were anti-war and anti-violent. So how Dylan was raised and how Eric was raised, I don't know. I guess it seems kind of different. But Dylan obviously was raised in a household, they say, that did not condone violence. So it was a shock to his parents when they found out after the fact that he was building bombs, that he was doing all of these things. We have to look at our children with the eyes of an outsider. Sometimes when you love someone, your vision gets clouded. Like you only see them as this baby, this innocent baby that you brought into the world that can do no wrong because they are so innocent. Some parents, they can see what their children are and they do turn them over to the authorities. Like there was one woman, I don't remember which show it was, but she knew that her son was basically a sexual offender. She knew that he was capable of these things, and she did so much in her power to stop it. However, most parents, even now, even if their child is grown, you'll see a father or a mother, he didn't hurt anybody. No, you've got the wrong one. You gotta free my cousin. You gotta free him even though he beat up 7 women. Just let him out. Just let him out. Girl, can't you see that he's a whole serial killer in your house? Negligence. Coddling. Sometimes we just gotta stop coddling these children and get them the help that they need. Some of your children are psychopaths. Some of your children have serious issues. Yes, it might hurt to know this inside, but if you just take it at, I guess, the raw view of things, you can prevent a tragedy or a massacre like Columbine. So, I'm sorry, I just can't believe, like, you have literal bombs in my house and I don't know anything about it? Or do I know something about it? I don't know. Because, you know, sometimes parents will be involved in stuff. I'm not saying, like, the Clevos, but I don't know about Eric's family. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not trying to accuse anybody of anything, so don't come at me. I'm just saying. If you see a child with these type of behaviors, say something. Say something. Even if you have to go to the police. A lot of people don't go to the police because they don't want their child to have something on their record. But I would rather have them with a record getting some therapy than to have them behind prison bars or in a grave. Another thing that Randy did through this book was he really focused on the aftermath of how this tragedy affected so many parents. Like, there were so many students who did not get the help that they needed after this tragic event. They might have had counselors, maybe at the beginning, but there should have been an extended period of time of counseling. He mentioned some scenarios in here or some events that happened that really ticked me off. I wish I could find the page. I really wish I could find the page, but I can't. There was one where they wouldn't let his son, one of his sons, Aaron, they wouldn't let his son or threatened to not let him graduate, all because it was either a lost book or a damaged book that happened during the massacre. They're like, you can't graduate unless you pay this $40. This dude was in a whole school shooting. He almost died, and you're worried about a $40 book. There was also accounts that Randy mentioned of some educators being mean to certain students after the fact, like not being empathetic of what these children had gone through, essentially re-traumatizing what happened with these children. Also, all of the families that were affected by this horrible event, people that lost their children, people that lost their sibling, people that lost their spouse. not only were the lives of the initial victims of Columbine, did those things happen. There were also suicides after Columbine. People couldn't handle it. They couldn't. Students committed suicide. Adults committed suicide. Children maimed for life. One child was shot in the face. He had to get so many surgeries. Some children were paralyzed, some of them for life. Just very, very disturbing. And a lot of them nowadays are telling their story, you know. Some of them are actually teachers at Columbine. Some of the students that were victims or, you know, like experienced the school shooting, some of those students are actual educators at Columbine, or they became educators later. Others go around on speaking engagements to share their story. Others have inspired others, like one student inspired this other kid. He was an adult, but the student, when he was an adult, inspired another kid to learn how to walk again. So there are stories of inspiration that come out of it, because that's the only thing that you'll be able to salvage from that. I personally feel that society has not allowed Columbine to completely heal. There's still children that they call Columbiners that are obsessed with the shooters. And I feel like if you're a child watching this and you're a Columbiner, you need to get help. I don't believe most of the Columbiners are homicidal. I feel personally that they are suicidal, and that for some reason they connect to these two murderers because they feel these are the only two that would understand, and it becomes an obsession. They have web pages. They'll like idolize Eric and Dylan. And this has been going on for years and years. One of the Columbiners, which is a girl named Soul, I don't know if it was 2019 or 2020, it might have been 2019. She was obsessed with Columbine, particularly Eric Harris, and she went to Littleton, Colorado. She was armed and, or well, they say she was armed and dangerous. She was on the wanted list. But she ended up, you know, taking her own life. She didn't kill anybody, she took her own life. I feel she took her own life as a ritualistic type of thing, but like, oh, I will be with him forever. But that was another Columbiner, and she also tried to get this other girl involved. Soul was obsessed with Eric, and the other girl was kind of obsessed with Dylan, but the other girl had at least some type of sense because she didn't do anything with weapons. She was like, yeah, I'm not about to kill myself. Are you crazy? The girl had her mother there. She had a strong parent household. So thank God that this girl at least has some sense and didn't do anything with weapons. Like, I guess she didn't take it as serious. It was just a hobby for her. But if you are a Columbiner, I would suggest you get help. You speak to someone, you speak to a therapist, you tell somebody that you're going through something. Even if the adults in your life are not paying any attention, go to an adult that you don't even know. Like, go to another school. Talk to the principal there. Killing people is not the answer. It will only cause you pain. What did Eric and Dylan do? They caused even more pain. They were not successful. They were failures at what they attempted to do. Yes, they caused mass trauma. Yes, they are still remembered, unfortunately, for their infamous failed bombing school shooting. But at the end of the day, they lost. They could have gone on and had a completely different life and put Columbine behind them, but instead they chose to be remembered as horrible people. They caused their parents and those who actually love them lifelong pain. Was it worth it? I don't think it was worth it. Randy also talks about there was another shooting, the 2 students that got murdered in the subway on Valentine's Day, or near Valentine's Day, in the year 2000, a year after Columbine. And he mentioned that Brooks, his son, helped or gave information to the police that there was drug activity at the subway. So those 2 children may have just been at the wrong place, wrong time. I don't know why somebody would murder these 2 children. Like, that just were working in a subway. I mean, well, one of them was working in a subway. I don't know if the girl worked in the subway, but they were a couple. They were in love with each other, and somebody literally took their lives, and I don't even know why. I want to see if there was some type of thing happening in Colorado at that time, because this whole shoddy police work that I've been reading about in this book almost reminds me of the John Benet Ramsey case with the shoddy police work. I calculated how far is Denver from Littleton, and it said 15-20 minutes driving. I'm not geographically savvy, but I'm wondering, I personally, out of curiosity, wonder if there was either some type of drug trafficking ring going on there, if there was some type of child trafficking ring going on, if there was like this whole ring of shoddy police work, like hidden agendas going on. I don't know. Because why would you hide these files? Why would you cover up so many different things, like the basement tapes you covered up, trying to silence people who actually had more information? What is it for? Tying up the phone lines, tying up the 911 calls. Some people even say that the bullets didn't come from Eric or Dylan, but friendly fire. That's an accusation. Also, the people who helped them access the weapons, they arrested one guy for helping them get an illegal gun, but what about, there were other adults involved? Like, are they going to be arrested? Why weren't they arrested? Why didn't they go to jail? Then there was another thing where they talked about the sheriff and all of these people tying up the phone lines, the 911 phone lines, because they were allowing themselves to get interviews. They're like, oh, such and such is on the phone. Let me talk to them. Oh, the president is on the line. People that are supposed to be keeping the phone lines clear, the sheriff and all these other adults, tangling up the 911 phone calls so that they could give interviews to the news media. Let's see. I should have put little, I'm sorry, this is crazy. Another thing that was interesting that stood out to me in this book was a chapter called After Religion, 330-2000. You are a God-fearing family. Religion has been handed down from generation to generation for as long as you can remember. The lessons have, for the most part, been taught well and learned well. This generation wasn't taught well. The Vietnam War caused an awakening of doubt throughout the country, and that doubt, that cynicism spread into many parts of our lives. We didn't teach our children that our country was right. Well, I don't agree with that, but without question, because we didn't believe it. We now believe that we should evaluate our country's actions objectively and with critical analysis. The wrong that was Vietnam taught us that. Religion is one of these. No, we didn't teach our children many of our values because we have lost some of the blind faith, that unquestioning belief that they require. Religion is one of these lost faiths. Many of us have no blind adherence to old religious faith. We have seen the wrong that blind religion and faith can do. Jonestown and the Kool-Aid suicides, actually it was Rite Aid, are a good example. We have seen the Catholic Church change stances on eating meat on Friday and other technicalities, and also the child assault. The old joke, I'm going to spend eternity in limbo for eating a bologna sandwich, has shown us the absurdity of some dogmatic beliefs. We didn't neglect religious teachings because we were lazy. We actually thought it would be better for our children to be less brainwashed by formal religion and to be independent. Then we dropped the ball. Since we didn't teach them religion, they were left with a large philosophical hole in their understanding of the world. We failed to fill this hole with a replacement value. No religion means no rules. Well, I don't agree with that, but no rules means no rules. No rules means you can kill. And it's interesting because one of Randy Brown's sons said, there was nothing for Eric and Dylan to really believe in. Now, I thought Dylan, I don't know if he was Judaism, I don't know, or if his parents were Jewish, but I can see what Randy means. There is a psalm, I want to say it's Psalm 19, and there's a line in there that I say a lot, and it is, the law of the Lord is perfect, nourishing the soul. The words of the Lord are true, making wise the simple. It's something about the law, or the words of the Lord are pure, making wise the simple. I translate that as, sometimes some people do not have intuition, they don't have any type of morality, so they literally need a religion in order to function in this society as a moral person. They can't just be a good person without a religion. They can't just be, moral by themselves. They need some type of doctrine to follow in order to function in this society without going to prison. There are some people that if they did not have a belief system, they would go around slaughtering people. There are some people that if there was no barrier, like a moral police force or a government, they would literally go around and become barbarians. So I can understand what he means by not having religion. I'm not saying this to be bombarded on atheists or anything, but even within atheists, a lot of atheists, or at least that I've met, have some type of morality with them. You don't see oh, I'm gonna go out and just shoot all these people. No, they need something that keeps them on a straight and narrow path. That's why some people oh, I don't want the 10 Commandments in school, or I don't want prayer in school. I mean, if you don't want prayer in school, then at least have some type of meditation in school, or some type of value system in school that is drilled into the child's brain. Because if you don't have something to stand on, you're just going to fall for anything. I think that's a quote by Martin Luther King, or one of the great historical people. If you don't stand for anything, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Eric and Dylan's belief system became destroying the school. That became their doctrine. That became their religion. I'm going to destroy the school. The school's belief system was the jocks are king, or athletics is king, or everything is fine on this side of town, which it honestly was not. Another factor that Randy Brown mentions in this book is, let me see, video games. Video games. And Eric and Dylan played a video game called Doom, which was, at the time, a very, very violent video game where you went around shooting people. So I'm going to show you a picture of Doom. Now, one of the arguments I heard in the past as I was growing up from other adults was, oh, these video games are making the children violent. This music is making the children violent. Ah. And, you know, when I was younger and I heard other young people say it, they're like, yeah, whatever. I play video games and I listen to violent music and I'm not violent. But, you know, as I've gotten older, even though I'm not old, I'm only 32. But as I've gotten older, I can now understand what they mean, you know? Because sometimes if you play something over and over and over, like an active shooter game, it just becomes a part of your patterns, subconsciously speaking. It becomes easy to end somebody's life because you've already ended multiple lives in a video game. It's almost like a simulation. I could see how the music can influence people, because even in our community, like in the Black community, we have a lot of discussions about music, like, why do you keep calling women B's and H's in this music? Why do you keep having songs about drive-bys and making money and slaughtering people? Because that's essentially what some of this new music is. Like, if you're not twerking, I'm not saying twerking is bad, but like, if you're not twerking for money, if you're not out shooting people, if you're not like, I'm the baddest in the game, or I'm going to shoot them up and I'm going to go over here and rattle a car. Some people, they cannot separate the art from actual reality. We saw that with, what's his face, 6ix9ine. He's like, I'm going to sing about gangs and then I'm going to join a gang. Sir, you were never, why? I don't understand. They want it to be their life. I personally, my personal opinion, I've seen more male rappers get murked more so than female rappers. Most of the female rappers, they'll sing about, like, they don't sing about Glocks. They don't sing about, I'm going to drive by your house and run up on you. They'll be like, I'm the baddest in the game. I'm making my money. I don't care what you say, blah, blah, blah. Look at me. Look at my body. Look at me wearing my clothes. And y'all cute. You're cute. Okay, you're cute. But then you listen to these dudes, and they'll be like, I don't care if you shot me 100 times. I want you to run up on me again. Run up on me. I know where you live. I'm going to drive by you. And all your friends are going to die. Like, sir, calm down. Like, can you tone it down a little bit? Like, and then you see what they spoke into existence happens to them. They'll be over here. They'll get shot up. They'll be over here. They'll get shot up. Or if not, they'll be thrown in the penitentiary. So I can see what Randy Brown means now at this age about these video games, these music. It just becomes a part of this culture of violence. Columbine happening now and Columbine happening then would have had two different reactions. Then it was huge. Now it's like, oh, it's another school shooting. Oh, it's another random shooting. Oh, they did this. Or you get lost in the names of all of these schools and all of these events. Like, they start getting, oh, the Parkland and the such and such and the Sacramento Six or something. Like, you lose track of the names because it just keeps happening over and over and over and over, and you become desensitized to these things. Randy Brown mentions this in the book where it like becomes the collective consciousness. We have a collective consciousness of violence, at least in the United States. I can't speak for other countries. because the United States was founded on violence. It's as old as American pie. You know, you had treaties, you had people slaughtering buffalo, Trail of Tears, enslavement, the Civil War, Vietnam. Like, you have all these just cycles of violence that you become desensitized. It's just like, oh man, that sucks. That's unfortunate. I guess I'll have to be careful. When I worked for one company and I kept seeing at the time violence over and over and over and active shooters, I was like, wow, my company has not prepared us for any active shooters. So for a year, I did my own active shooter training by myself. What I would do is I would go on the different floors, because we had, elevators in different floors. I would go on the different floors and ask myself, if we had an active shooter and they were on this floor, where would I hide? I would go in there, practice hiding. What would I use as a weapon? And I would look around like things I would grab as a weapon, or I would hide something that I could use as a weapon in case something happened. In our building, we had a key code, or that you could get access to certain rooms. So I'm like, what if the active shooter is one of us and they have a key? Where would I hide if they had a key? What would I use? What are the signs? What are the signs that they're going to do something? I would practice different exits. I would practice like, how fast can I get to there? This was me personally a year before. The company actually is like, oh, we need active shooter training. You think? Because we're working with the public and a lot of them have mental illness. So this is when you're going to do the active shooter? Okay. All right, good for you. It's a little too late, but okay. Thank God nothing has happened as of yet, or ever will, in order for you to get on the ball. Now, with schools, they have, some schools, they'll have the children doing active shooter training, which is very, very disturbing, but I guess it's necessary because people going around being gun happy, using weapons and different things. They talking about arming teachers. I don't know personally. I don't personally know. Maybe arm the teacher if the teacher had, I would rather have an armed teacher that has some military experience or maybe experience as a cop, because what if they're scared? They're not trained to like be in those type of predicaments over and over and over again. They're in a classroom of children. I also am kind of leery of like maybe an educator having a gun, because I also, what if they're the shooter? What if they're the crazy one? And you have these children trapped in a classroom with a crazy person? Like, so another thing that really irked me in this book was the chapter called $3.1 million. And this was so insulting. I gotta read this to you. This was written January 21st, 2000. They are raising money for the new school library. They are the parents of the murdered children. The school district allowed them to raise the money. They, the school board, didn't contribute any money. They just allowed them to raise the money on their own. They, the school district, spent $9 million on a new football stadium and didn't contribute at all to the rebuilding of the library. Not a dime, not a penny. The main story here is the courage of the parents of the murdered children, Mrs. Tomlin, Mr. Robo, and the rest. Robo? They have so much heart, so much character. A new library to stop the photo opportunities and the tourists from going to see where the killings had taken place. A new library for the new students to protect them from having to sit in the same chairs and room where children had been killed, their children. January 20th, 2001. There is more. There was an open house a month or so ago at the public library, a few hundred yards to the west of the school. In the meeting room, they had all of the swatches for the wallpaper and paint they were going to use to redecorate the library in the school. Yes, the school district was going to redecorate the school library where the killings took place. A new coat of paint, some new carpet without blood stains, and the school library was going to be good as new. Patch a few bullet holes, and everything will be fine. This was the solution from the school district. I know. I went to the decorating meeting. I brought home the decorating brochures, almost in shock, thinking that I just didn't understand the world we lived in. So confused that people in the school board is made up of people could be that cold and that callous to the sadness of others. Oh my God. And there's so many examples in this book of where I'm just like, really, school? Do you really hate people that much? Like, are you really going to insult people that much? Like, wow. So you are going to pay for swatches for a carpet, but you're not going to revamp the whole library. Like, oh, this is so crazy. So, with Columbine, one thing, watching the videos of like 20 years after, because 2019 was the 20th anniversary of Columbine. One thing I noticed is that society just wouldn't let them heal. They wouldn't let the school walk away from that memory. Now, I'm not saying you're supposed to forget. I'm saying you want to keep people re-traumatized and stagnated. It's like you don't want them to heal. Let's say, for example, God forbid, I got shot, and for the next 10 years, you keep making me want to tell you every day the story of when I got shot and show you the bullet wound over and over and over and over and over again. It's like opening up a wound and trying to keep them stuck in that time. There's been people, the Columbiners, I feel, unfortunately, the Columbiners, even though they're in some type of pain, they're still keeping that memory alive of Columbine. There's still people that are copycatting after what Eric and Dylan did. They're still glorifying and keeping the wrong memories alive. The memory I would like people to have from Columbine, even though I was not there, but me personally, in my own personal opinion, is prevention. And also creating a culture that has collective peace instead of collective violence. It isn't one grand thing that happens. It's a series of little things that leads up to that grand thing. It's a series of little actions that lead up to the change that we need in our society. I know I'm repeating this again, but humiliation. Randy Brown emphasizes how humiliated these children were. Not just Eric and Dylan, but all of the different children that were bullied. And how it just made them snap. And how in all of us, there's the potential for that snapping. I only snapped one time on a bully. And that was probably one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. My bullying didn't happen as a child. It actually happened as an adult. I worked in St. Charles as a groundskeeper in my early 20s. And there were all men on the job. I was the only girl. There weren't that many black people on the job, so I faced a lot of sexism and racism. The racism came from my boss, my supervisor, and also just random strangers. Like, I remember one day we were all sweeping the parking lot, and somebody called our boss and said that we were breaking into cars and stealing stuff out of cars, even though we were literally in one spot sweeping in a parking lot. It was all black people, and we were breaking into cars. So it's kind of scary, like how some of your bullies can be people that you do not see. But my main bully was this dude. I was maybe like 23, or was I 23? I might have been 22 or 23. And this dude was 22. He had a crush on me. I didn't like him. And because I didn't like him or give in to his advances, he harassed me the entire time he worked there. He would follow me down the halls when I was by myself because I had to vacuum 5 floors alone. He would follow me down the hall. He would whisper things in my ear like, Kiara, you're so stupid, and da-da-da-da, you need to give yourself to me. I can't believe you're wearing that today. He would just whisper because we had to work together. So the first thing I did was tell him to stop, and he didn't stop. So that's strike one of my humiliation. The second time, I told my coworkers. They didn't make him stop. That was the third strike of humiliation. No, the second strike of humiliation. The final third time, I went to an authority figure, which was my supervisor, and I said, hey, this dude is following me down the halls. He keeps coming around corners. He keeps whispering in my ear. He keeps threatening me. Can you please tell him to stop? Like, I don't know what else to do. And my boss, my supervisor at that time, was so racist and so sexist. He's like, okay. And I heard him say something like, I think he cursed me out, or he's like F her, or something like that. So if I could go back in time, what I should have done, being the age I am now and having more bravery, what I should have done is I should have gone to the police. But I didn't. I thought, to my limited knowledge, that I had done everything that I could. And that part I can relate to, almost in Randy Brown's book, where he's like, they suffered from humiliation. They were angry. They might have tried different tactics, but nothing worked. The same with Randy Brown's family. They were bullied by the police. They were like turning in all of this material, trying to stop Eric and Dylan, yet the police didn't do anything. They felt that they had done everything that they possibly could do in order to prevent this, only to be turned around and accused of being involved and harassed and losing all of their friends. Just very fascinating to me. But I thought I had done everything I could possibly do, and at that point, I just felt hopeless. I felt hopeless against this dude's advances. I felt overwhelmed because he was bigger than me. He was just so persistent and so vulgar to me. And I just didn't know what to do. There was nobody to protect me. And what's funny is actually the same predicament of like nobody protecting me followed me throughout the rest of my adulthood. Mostly with like men harassing me everywhere. Like I had to protect myself. The only time I was ever protected from a man that like was really seriously threatening me or harassing me was my friend from the military. That was one. He was a guy. But the rest of them, it was women protecting me. It was girls. Or I had to protect myself. So the final straw of this dude harassing me, it was me, him, and all of my coworkers sitting in a circle. And he said something, and I don't remember what he said. All of a sudden, I heard a loud noise. Then I felt this throbbing pain in my hand. And I thought to myself, God, what is that noise? And dang, why does my hand hurt? I look up and everybody's staring at me shocked. So apparently I had slapped him. I had slapped this man, and I didn't even know I had slapped him at full force across his face. And I was so shocked that that had happened that I left the room. That was the day I became afraid of myself, where I'm just like, I literally attacked this person, and I didn't even know I attacked this person. I slapped this dude, and I didn't even see it coming. I didn't even have a thought of slapping him. So the same can go with these children. with this endless suffering and this endless bullying and this endless pressuring and this culture of violence over and over and over being repeated in video games and videos and music and all of that. The same can go with them. Like one day they just snap and they don't know why. They don't have the maturity of being like, hey, that's illegal, or hey, that's wrong. They just act on their emotions, not just children, but adults too. So we have to foster a society of peace. We have to foster a society of respect. You may not accept a person's beliefs. You may not accept how they live their life, but you have to at least have some form of respect. And that is the first step to ending this cycle of school violence and violence everywhere. So yeah, I learned a lot from this book. I don't want this video to be too long. I just learned a lot. I learned how the pain can follow throughout the years, how we have to, even if there's a tragedy, find some type of lesson to learn from it so that we can prevent it. Right now, currently, the violence that I have been focusing on and studying right now is Black femicide, Black women being just slaughtered every 5.5 hours. I feel that the new bully that is causing this are these dudes on YouTube just talking about like assaulting women and stuff. The only way we can stop any of this, like this culture of violence, is silencing, not murder. Like taking legal action against people that are promoting violence. Put out a lawsuit against these rappers sending out, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to do this. Children are listening. Somebody needs to sue these people. I'm sure they have already, but there needs to literally be a lawsuit, a collective lawsuit, or at least a petition. Because the more and more and more we allow this, the more we accept it and the more we become desensitized. So it won't be a surprise when all of a sudden you see a child just do something to a school or a Black woman just be shot dead in the street. And I know this is true because I've had 3 instances of a man verbally saying he was going to rape me, 3 different men in a crowd of men, and nothing happened because they had been desensitized. They've been desensitized to take actions. That is not okay. It's not okay to promote violence in any way, shape, or form. Not in video games, not in movies, not in music, not anywhere. Stop popularizing violence. Look into yourself and walk in peace. That is the only way we can prevent another Columbine or another mass display of violence. So thank you everyone for watching this video. I recommend this book even though I am not finished with it. I think that you can learn a lot of lessons from this book because he does make some very good points. He does give a fresh perspective on the situations. And now I will present to you my poem, Ricochet, that I have written inspired by Randy Brown's book. Happy reading, everyone, and talk to you later. Ricochet by Kiara Lynn Smith. Part 1. The World. Routine, the king of small awakenings, schedules and patterns, subtle puppetries, splash coffee, ruffled ties and jagged stocks, hand hammering alarms on morning clocks. Legs shuffle, stylus swipes from screen to screen. You're running late now. 11:19. Your thoughts are fixed on more important things. Put on your shoes to walk past him again. Part 2. His hands. I am the space you stare through endlessly. Personified, invisibility. My words shrivel in silent slavery. My hands now rise to vocalize for me. I fold into myself, palm against palm. Inhale, exhale. My hands, sweet breathing psalm. Enumerate the ways I'll craft our lives. Sciamachy, I hurl fists to survive. Open my fingers, let empathy thrive. To hate or love, too fateful to contrive. Part 3. Guardian. I speak to you, you only sit and stare. How many ways must I express my care? It truly seems as if you are not there. Nothing is working. Not therapy chairs, not pills, not prayers, my spiral of despair. Why must you rip my very life apart? Why can't you hear the breaking of my heart? If this is present you, bring back past tense. Bring back the laughter filled with innocence. Bring back the soul that was not veiled in woe. Where is that person? How I miss him so. You plague my senses and rattle my mind, but no greater treasure can I find. Without you here, I don't know what I'd do. Should I let go? Or should I stand by you? Part 4. Bystander. I don't know what to say, so I am mute. My eyes will study and divert disputes. Ages ago, a wise one spoke true notes, that we shall know their nature by their fruits. But what is my true form? Pure cowardice? Unaware? Cold? Forever powerless? Perhaps my speech can halt history's song, big, blinding spotlight glaring on the wrong. But no, not so. My actions are not strong. Slowly I fade into complacent throngs. Head down, I choose to dash past him again. Maybe another mouth will voice the change. Part 5. Outsider. Who can I blame? There are so many names, entangled in his cruel, chaotic game. A precious gift, a life of normalcy. I'm caught up in his quest for infamy. I did not ask to play, he threw me in. Violence, a battle that nobody wins. Vast media shows perpetual sins. Brutality is our chosen domain. Wrong place, wrong time, I watch my every move, the solemn absence of brotherly love. I see him in the store, mirror and train, a different weapon, still his wicked grin, a different name, but still his vicious acts. Is there no sacred space from his attacks? Where is the haven where fear cannot dwell and cast its evil, calculating spell? Part 6. The Choice. So many choices, God. What should I do? Fall on my knees, surrendering to you? Drop to the ground with arms behind my back? Polish my power? Let the bullets crack? I called on you. Why didn't you reply? I'll force the world to listen to my cry, even if you and I both have to die. Until my teardrops form oceans of sighs, with hands of rage, I'll slaughter their routine. Can you see me? I am your reckoning. The clock is ticking. Hammer the alarm. They say all peace can counteract all harm. I am the blossom of your hidden seeds. I am the savior of my muffled pleas. Are you my advocate? Are you my fraud? My lone soliloquy has drawn a crowd. Look into me, I wear a painful shroud. Embrace my hands, they've made a tragic vow. Wish I could break it, but I don't know how. So many anthems screaming in my head. Schedules and patterns, subtle puppetries, questions, flashbacks, blatant hypocrisies. Am I a vision or a waking dream? Forlorn, too late now, 11:19. You'll never pass me in silence again. Look at me, look, I'm your awakening.